So Arsenal beat Leeds 5-0, but there's one player that every single person is talking about, and that is Max Dowman. Now in this video, we're going to talk about his Premier League debut and what we learned, and just how he can take this into the future to probably play quite a key part for Arsenal this season. So let's get into it. Now, Max Dowman is not really a surprise for anyone that is on this channel before. We've made videos about him in the youth level, we've made videos about him over pre-season, and ultimately, I think him playing his Premier League start was not that big of a surprise. On the podcast with Forder on Friday, I literally said that I think he should be on the bench if the injury reports are true, and they seem to be true in the end. And ultimately, if we're winning by a comfortable margin, I wouldn't be surprised if he came on, and ultimately, all of that happened in the end. Now, I don't want to get into the crux of his age and all of that other stuff that I think people have spoken about way too much at this point. I ultimately just want to talk about the football and the player on the pitch, because that is why we're all here to get some analysis in. Now, I will say there is no secret by the fact that he played 30 minutes at the second game of the season. That is a clear trust in him. And obviously with Bukayo Saka's injury, he will probably be that backup right winger, I would have to say, at least for the next few weeks until he comes back, or whatever happens with Saka, with Madueke being the main right winger, who I think will be great there. Now, this is basically what I want to highlight with Max Dowman, because when you watch the highlights of his game, or even just the 30 minutes he came on, every time he received the ball, and I think he only had around 14 touches in the end, every single time was pretty much the same chance. Now, I will say this is a favourable circumstance by the fact that Arsenal are already 4-0 up. We're playing against a team that have kind of given up, and the game is ultimately going a lot of slower pace than some games you're going to see, but it is still professional level, and he is still 15 nonetheless. Now, a lot of the time, what was happening with Arsenal is Rice was coming into this more deeper position to be that quarterback player, to do the long passes out quickly to the wings, and Mendy was the guy that was actually kind of moving a lot more freer and going more up in these like sort of attacking areas, and this was because he could put these little intricate balls into these little areas through the little lines. Exactly what he prefers. It absolutely makes sense. That's how you use your double pivot. Now, this kept happening against Leeds late on, and I think, yet again, like we said, it's down to tiredness. Maybe they didn't care. But majority of the game, when Saka was on the pitch, yes, again, he was getting double teamed. He was having two players over here, and they were even bringing their midfielder and even maybe sometimes a striker to come over to kind of cover that midfield position as well. We saw it all the time. It really limited Saka. Obviously, he scored in the end from that counter-attacking goal, which we moved quick on. Now, with Max Dowman, something that was quite prevalent when he came on is that the space that he got on this wide area. Now, we've mentioned before, and obviously you've seen from all the clips of Max, he prefers really being on this byline. Like I've said this many times, and he is super young, so it can change, but I think he is so much more suited to being a right winger right now because he loves the touchline. And unlike Waneri, who is good out there but better inside, I think Dowman's probably better in this area, running through and then cutting in into the box. But you can do that as a winger, so I probably wouldn't move him personally, especially because Arsenal probably need a right winger more given the injury problems. Now, what kept happening with Mendy, Rice, and Saliba, you saw Gabriel and Mascara all do it, was that they kept switching the ball straight to Dowman in this area. Dowman was basically picking the ball up in space, and Goodmanson was about, let's say, here. There's a big enough gap there to dribble past them, but also it's going to be hard. Now, a lot of the time, this player was getting covered by Waneri. Waneri would make some good runs sometimes, but also Waneri kind of just stayed there. A little bit more dynamic, I think, than an Odegaard off the ball personally in attack. So I think that kind of helped, and I do think the player didn't know whether to go with Waneri or not, and that kept becoming a problem. Now, Max Dowman in these areas was then getting just straight one-on-ones. It was against Goodmanson over and over and over again down this full-back side. Now, Dowman is a player that will just keep trying and keep doing things. And when you watch the clips of him, he receives the ball in them wider areas, he takes one touch on his chest, and he runs. He doesn't think about things, he doesn't wait and take time like someone like Martin Odegaard does. He will run into that box and he will try and take you on one-on-one. He tried about 4 dribbles in the half an hour he was on, and I'm not surprised. This is the player that we know we have seen before. Absolutely fearless. Now, the best thing about this was that the first one that he does, he actually carries the ball very far, and then I think Goodmanson does a really good challenge inside the box, but he doesn't give up. He receives the ball, and his close control in agility in these areas is really fantastic. And there's one where he goes past Goodmanson, he goes for it over and over again, he looks like he's going to do it, and then he just does it at a different moment. Goodmanson ends up fouling him, and Arsenal get a really good free kick in a great position. Not only is that dribbling so good, I think how he is so sort of unique in his way that you know what he wants to do, but he delays it, and then does it when you don't expect it, which I think is fantastic. He also can come inside as well, and that makes him even better as a two-way winger. But it's that physicality and that strength that he can keep up. We talk about Highlanders always having this like unreal strength where they can just hold on to the ball, and he has that. You know, he's 15 years of age. I know I said I wasn't going to mention the age, but in this circumstance, I think it is relevant. And ultimately, he is being able to fend them off. Is he going to win every physical battle ever? No. If he plays someone that's like 6'4", they're probably going to bully him off the pitch. That happens. It happens to pros as well. Poor Trossard, same thing happens to it. But ultimately, that dribbling level down there is insane. And the amount of ability to carry that ball consistently down this line is a massive thing for Arsenal. We talk about Madueke coming in because we want him in these wider areas and running into this space. It's literally the entire reason why Madueke is at the club and is going to be a great player in that direct approach style. Now, Dowman can just do that. And I do think when he gets into these positions down the wing and then you start cutting inside in these sort of areas, it becomes problems. And I do want to say, when he gets into these wider areas, he still has that sort of Ethan Nwaneri about him where he will come into the side to the space and use it to have a shot. Now, he isn't as deadly as Nwaneri in these areas. This is the Nwaneri area. This is what he's a specialist at. He scores all the time from them. Now, the thing is with Max Dowman, he can do this, and I think it's something really good. But something I see a lot with sometimes he shoots to the academy and even on pre-season, he would prefer to get into the box, which I really like. You know, he doesn't angle himself in a way to shoot outside unless he kind of gets blocked off like this moment. Now, this means that he has this dribbling capability in the final third. He is quite decisive in his actions and can go either way. You know, when he goes on outside of players, he is great and he always seems to be able to pick a ball out or find a man or just know what he wants to do in the box. Now, I also want to talk about the confidence level of him. We talked about the shot that went over the bar from outside the box, but he did have another shot from outside the box, that one that everyone was screaming about. And yet again, it was from the free kick that we mentioned earlier that he won. Whenever he does a really good ball in, it gets headed out just by Leeds' defender, comes straight to Dowman at the edge of the box. He doesn't even think. Half volley, smashes it, and he just skims over the ball. I think just a slight too much. I think it bounces a little bit too much for him, but it is close. And if that little bounce didn't happen, I think this is at least going on target, and who knows what would have happened. But something I like about Max Dowman is when things don't go for him, even in this game, there's a few times where he controls the ball, you know, he slips over a little bit, it's not quite going for him, and he just doesn't give up, does he? And in this game, we're 4-0 up, bear in mind, and he is still trying really hard. And I also will say, alongside of Victor Gyökeres, that is a brilliant mentality to have, because we know Gyökeres is never going to give up. And that penalty, yet again, that he won, epitomizes that completely. We talk about him keep receiving the ball in this space on this right hand side. We've seen it over and over again, and it's funny because this is one of the times that he's actually slowing down and looking around of what he should do. But Max Dowman, like looking at him in the side of the box, these tight areas, there's 2 to 3 players around him, you know, he can keep the ball, he's so agile, and that's how he wins the pen. You know, he gets a little nick and he goes down, and it is a penalty, and it is a brilliant decision again. And something that is so mental about him is that you can't do anything about it. You know, if this guy continues to play and will continue to probably play for Arsenal this season if he has to, players are going to be a little bit more aware of what he wants to do. You know, you see it with Ethan, you know, players know that he wants to cut inside on that foot in that area, so they block it for him. Happens all the time. It's going to be harder and he has to adapt to that. With Max Dowman, his dribbling is that good where you're just like, what can you do? It's almost like a Lamine Yamal level, and I hate the comparisons, but it's the easiest one to make, where he gets into these areas and you just simply can't get the ball off him. You know, he's not a small guy and he's not weak at all, so it's not even easy to get off him in terms of physicality. Yes, if you get a 6'4" guy and he makes a perfect tackle, that's probably the best way to do it. And yet again, there will be media outlets that go out there and criticise Arteta and criticise Arsenal like they always do. They find any sort of little thing to get at us and, you know, blame us, and even fans will as well. But there's a reason why this guy's in the team. There's a reason why this guy played. He wasn't on the bench of some novelty thing. Let's not forget, we came second the last couple of years in the Prem. We're the second best team in England. You know, we have no right to be playing a 15-year-old if we don't have to. You know, we don't need to. But ultimately, if you're that good enough, you will play. And he has proven that. We all saw it over pre-season. I watched pre-season, you watched pre-season, and we all said this guy is good enough to be on the bench. And with a few injuries that we found at the start of the season, which is unlucky, I am actually less worried with the depth that we have brought in. And obviously, like, you don't want to get too excited for his age, but ultimately that's the job of the club and the players to keep him grounded. But Max Dowman has proven that not only does he deserve to be on the bench, he can play. I think later on in games, he is the perfect player to bring on because he runs at players, he never gives up, and he is always so efficient in the box. You know, we talk about box efficiency, which we don't really have a lot of the time. He has that, and I just think that is an amazing thing to say. Now, I want to look at his stats on FootMob because it is still something we have to talk about. But the fact he had 2 shots again, I mean, if you look at the shots that he's had per game now, he's having quite a lot. And this is what I mean by direct attacking player. You know, we bought Madueke, we bought Woklz for this sort of style of player. But he made 2 passes out of 2, which is crazy. He had the same amount of passes as shots. 16 touches, 5 touches in the opposition box, which if you remember is 1 less than Woklz in the game overall. And look at the dribbles, 1 out of 4. He tried 4 dribbles. He was on the pitch for half an hour. You know, defensively, he works hard. He gets back. He puts himself about. His recovery time is excellent. There's a few times where they got down this like right-hand side and he comes back and takes that ball out. You know, 2 out of 2 tackles, 2 defensive contributions as well. But look at the ground duels, man. You know, fouled twice, and we all know about that. He's going to get fouled loads. He's a dribbly type of player. That's how it works. 5 out of 9 ground duels. To get even in 9 ground duels in half an hour in a game which was broadly over, being 4-0 at the time, is insane. Now, it is funny because I remember saying a couple of weeks ago, I'm not going to speak about Max Dowman again, but I didn't expect on the second game of the season, before the season started, for him to be playing half an hour and playing well and winning a penalty. And I just feel like we can't not talk about it when it's mainstream at this point and it's not some niche thing we're talking about. So I did think it was relevant to talk about him. Now, let me know what you guys think about this video in the comments, and please go and watch my video from earlier about Victor Woklz. I appreciate you as always, and I'll see you tomorrow.